And here we are at the Event Ensemble Spotlight with David Twigger, the amazing, famous, ever effervescent, talented, I mean, extraordinarily unique individual, one who I am enamored of, just putting it out there. And I don't know if he knows this, but I'm a stalking fan of you and what you do.
I did not know that, but I'm going to hire you to do my intros from now on. So,
thank you so much for joining us in the spotlight. So happy to have you. Just again, I'm a huge fan. So thank you so much. And Vermilion Events, you have really done it all, and you do it all.
we try actually. So we've kind of gone the whole gambit because when I launched, I can do everything because I've got such the diverse background. But we've honed into a couple different areas now that the company kind of focuses on and things like that. So, but it's been a wild ride, but very exciting actually.
Well, I'm excited to hear about that. But first, I've got this little thing about planners, and I don't mean this to be disparaging, but so often when I speak to planners, they say, "Oh, I'm a planner." Well, tell me about your service. Well, see that corner over there? I decorated that, and I'm a planner. And I kind of went, "Oh, okay." And then I said, "Okay, so you're a planner." Yes, yes. Here's the timeline. Thank you very much. Have a good time. I'll see you later. And that's a planner.
That's why I love you, Scott. To bring that up is there a question or you just want me to talk about that whole?
You could talk about any of that because I'm so confused as to, and even the other day, somebody said, "I'm looking for somebody to decorate my house for the holiday season." And you said I could do that. And I went, "But wait a minute, I thought you're not a decorator, you're a planner." So yeah. I'm confused.
Yes, well, exactly. So, and it's a great question because I am a big advocate of, planners and people like staying in their wheel well, but kind of like, you can have a bigger wheel well around it. So yes, we do decorating just because I love holiday decor and the holidays and stuff like that. So we do a rather large holiday party here at home, but then I do holiday decor for a few hotels. I just got into that. So that's just like a side thing that we kind of do. So there is a big difference between an event designer and event planner, or like an event decorator and event planner. There are a lot of people out there who are planners. To me, someone who is a planner as myself is all encompassing. So we do, I take over production, I take over design, the time flows, your vendors. That's a planner who does all of that. There are people out there who are planners, who are incredibly talented and they're wonderful, but they're a little bit more on the event design portion. They can do really pretty decor and table designs, and they know a great caterer who can come in and do your party. And then maybe they're closer to party planners, but an event planner to me is someone who understands front of the house, back of the house, can take all of those different vendors and suppliers and make sure that they're all working together and it's cohesive. And that's my biggest thing is I see people who are planners and they've recommended the vendors, but then the vendors just do their own thing, and you can't have a really nice, large event that we do without, being a part of production. You can set a really pretty room, and here's an example. I worked with someone and I was just doing the production side, and they set up a really pretty room. Linens and the flowers, and it was just gorgeous. And it was all the colors that the client wanted. And then production came in and said, "Well, your branding colors are blue, so we're going to light this room blue." And they lit the room blue, and it was a pretty blue. But if you light a room blue, what does it do? Like everything on your table is now gray. You have no color, you have no pretty. It's just gray and a little bit of blue. And that's my story to tell people is like a planner's gonna know that you need to go ahead and talk to production. What are you guys doing here? And what's the flow? And what's your goal for this event? So it is kind of confusing because everybody's a planner now. And we love, people working in the industry, and we love working together with all that. But I always suggest that if you're a caterer, be a caterer. If you're a florist, be a florist. Can you help out some clients who may need a few things? Always. But if they start asking, like, if you're, they hired a caterer, but like now we need like rentals, but then we want, entertainment. And what about some lighting because it's outside? Stop. You need to call a planner. They're going to go ahead and bring all this together for you. And that's what we consider planner.
I hope I haven't jumped on the deep end yet.
I'm sure people get upset. I mean, it's out there, but I'm known for speaking my mind and having kind of like an opinion. I'm very supportive of the community and everybody in it, but that is something that's like near and dear to my heart, is that I see that all the time where I see people producing their own events. And then the biggest item really is that then they call us and like, well, we haven't worked with you. Why aren't you calling us? And I'm like, that's because you're producing your own events. So you're technically now a competitor. So I'm not going to call you to do my catering or call you to do my decor because you're technically a planner now. So that kind of like is a thing. If you're going to go ahead and expand yourself into planning and producing your own events when you're actually another vendor, you kind of, put yourself into that category. So
Interesting. And yet, when I speak to vendors, sometimes their perspective is always so narrow, because if it's a caterer, then it's dinner and it's a dining event. And if you speak to the DJ, it's a dance party. And if you speak to the photographer, it's a photo shoot. So
it's true. But that's another reason why you need that planner, because you need to bring it all together and tell like the client, this is what the clients is. Maybe they're like they're foodie clients and it's all about the food, and the DJ is just really kind of like in the background there to play music. You did that for me for an event of mine. It was that house party where you were fabulous, but I mean, the music was kind of like the music, and they were having like the house party, stuff like that. So again, that's where, you need that planner person to come in and find out what the client really wants. And then you talk to your strategic partners, as I like to call them, and say, this is like what their main focus is, this is what we need to work on together. And that's how it kind of comes together to be like really smooth event, versus if you all show up thinking it's a photo shoot or a dinner or a dance party, then the DJ's there trying to get people to dance and the caterer puts their food out, it's going to get cold because no one's going to be watching it because they rather dance, and so on and so forth.
So when you do events and you are the planner, do the vendors go through you, or do they speak directly to the client, or does it depend on the client's preference?
The correct answer is it depends on the client. My answer is that they're going to go through me if they've hired me to be the planner. If they've hired me to be like the designer or like the decor person, then obviously it's not the same thing. But if I'm the planner, it's going to go through me. Now, this doesn't mean that they're not going to speak directly to the client, because there's times where I'll have like, if it's like a wedding and it's a social event and they've got specific things, I'm going to have the florist talk to the client. I'm going to be there, or I'm going to be involved, but they can go through like, oh, I like this flower. What about this flower? They're the expert on flowers. I'm not an expert on flowers, but I'm going to know what they're talking about, because if the florist shows up and it's not those flowers and the bride kind of like freaks out, or the groom, the wedding couple, I know what happened. I know the story in the background and what's going on. And then you can check with the florist, like, did you get these flowers? And is it going to be this height? And if they like, well, we've changed out the candles, it's something else. So I prefer them to go through me. And then if there's times they speak directly, then I'm just kind of copied in and listening on those conversations, just so we can be helpful. We don't want it.
I think it's such an advantage to have you there. Because sometimes a client will say blue, and I'll think blue, navy blue. And when I show up, their idea of blue is actually teal. And that navy blue is going to clash with the teal, but they called it blue. And there are many instances, whether you're talking about style of music or colors or mood or tempo or theme, there can be breakdown in communication, and to have a third party there that can translate or that can communicate to make sure that we're all on the same page really makes a difference.
Well, and it's helpful because, I mean, again, especially you like style of music, because, they say like, well, we kind of want, and they name like 10 different styles of music. You're like, how do I get, put all those in there? But the planner has a lot more communication with the client than any like one of the vendors. And so they're having a conversation with me about style of music. And then if you and I are talking and you're like, we're going to start off with this, and I suggested this, I may know from in my head because I've listened to them play music and stuff like that. Like when she says like this style, she really means like this. That's like when you ask like, what do you want your event to look like? Well, I kind of want it to be like modern and classic, but a little bit like rustic. And you're like, name like 6 different, styles. And so that's where, and my big thing with all of like the strategic partners is communication, because a lot of times like, some people are like, oh, I don't need to talk to the clients until like a month out. And I'm like, let's all communicate more because it's better. Then you're not showing up with like, well, I thought she wanted like, blue. And I'm like, well, that's Tia, that's happened. It happens all the time. I had that happen the other day. Like they looked at the chairs. The client assumed that they knew because everything was white for their party that they wanted the white ones. But when she was in there talking to the client, she's like, oh, I love these chairs. The style that they had, the color was black, but it was the style that she loved. She assumed because everything else that they had ordered for the event from that rental company was white, that it would be the white chair. And I wasn't included in that order. So they show up and it's black chairs. I'm like, I don't think that's right. But if we had more communication, then we would have caught that beforehand.
And communication is so key. I did a beautiful wedding at the Four Seasons in Las Vegas, which meant that I traveled from Phoenix to Las Vegas. And when I show up, they have a planner I discovered that day. And the entire room is white. And I'm not exaggerating when I say the entire room. They've draped white, they've white carpeted, they've white chairs, it's a white runner, and all my gear is black.
Well, I mean, do you have white gear? You don't have white gear.
No, I don't have white gear. I have DJ black gear. But thank goodness there was a solution, because the planner came over and said, I thought this was going to happen. And I said, well, I'm glad you thought. I didn't even know. And she had white drapes for everything that was my equipment.
That's great. But honestly, like you say, communication, she probably could have like sent an email like, hey, it's all white. Do you have, because some people have like stocks, the stocks.
Right.
But at least something you could have like, yeah, no, I don't. And then, or maybe I can get some.
And had I known, I could have gotten white socks, but there was no communication. So once again, the communication is so important.
Well, the fact that you didn't even know there was a planner, I'm like,
well,
did you do a timeline?
Yes, but I did it with the couple, and I asked them specifically, do you have a planner? And they said no. So, it happens, whether it was miscommunication, whether the planner came in later, who knows? And I asked couples what their colors are. So again, communication breakdown somewhere. So it's so important. But let us move on, because now that we've thrown all the other planners under the bus, tell me about Vermilion.
Vermilion Events. So I spent 24 years in the hospitality, like hotel side of the industry, pretty much every position you can do. I worked for DMCs. I ran a special event venue here and one in Las Vegas. And then I was just getting to the point where I wanted to do my own thing. The last time Arizona had the Super Bowl, I had picked up some Super Bowl clients, and I was like, if I'm going to do this, let's do this. And so I launched. Then I was like, I got chicken and scared, and I took a job at the Phoenix Convention Center, which is hilarious. Nobody really knows that because I wasn't there very long. But I was there during Super Bowl, which was kind of cool because that's where it was. Mm-hmm. And I launched, and it's kind of gone from there. I mean, I have the heavy hospitality background. We did a lot of weddings in the beginning because that's not, I wouldn't say easiest, but it's like the simplest step to go into when you're doing events is going to weddings, because they're all over the place and there's tons of people and stuff. And I launched, and I learned a big lesson, which I'd love to share with everybody, is that because everybody wants to do everything, because you feel that you can. And that's not the way to run your business. I cast a very large, wide net. And I learned a lesson when I was sitting at another DJ company a long time ago. I was sitting in their lobby talking about, things that we were going to do together. And somebody called them looking for a wedding planner. And she sat there and she's like, well, I'm not really sure. You can call this person or you can call this person. And then she got off the phone and I was just staring at her. I'm like, who was that? And she's like, well, they called looking for a wedding planner. And I'm like, what do you think that I do? And her answer was probably like the most flattering answer. She's like, well, you're David Twigger. You do everything. And I'm like, well, I appreciate that, but I'm a wedding planner. And she's like, oh, wow. And I learned that if you're not rather specific on some of the things that you do, then when something comes up, people don't think of you. So that's why, there are certain things out there, like with the holiday decor, people know because I post pictures on social media that I do that kind of thing. So, but for the company, pick something or a few things that you do very well that you love and focus on that and then grow from there. Don't try and do it all in the beginning because it's not good for your business. I had a launch and I had, the city came out and people were so supportive and so loving and I felt grateful. And then the next 2 months I sat there next to my phone. I'm like, no one was calling. And I'm like, what did I do? And it's because I didn't go after, I didn't tell people this is what I do. I am we do large events. Like now we're meeting planners and we do like large conferences. And then we do big annual events and nonprofit galas, and we still do weddings as well. But, we're more focused on that piece of it. So that's where Vermilion came from. And I, was lucky that I'm in a position where I could launch that without having to go into debt. Yes, it was a big thing. But some people can't do that. So you just have to make sure, talk to a business coach. I know Event Ensemble has some. I want to mention him because I actually talked to him. Is it David Hepburn?
Whoa, very good. Yes.
Yes, he's a member. And I actually sat down with him when I first started coming to the Event Ensemble, and he had some great advice. So I highly suggest people doing that. You may think you know everything about what you're doing, but having somebody sit down with you and talk you through this is what you need to do to be successful. You have to have a business plan. You have to have some goals financially and make sure that you can do these things, because so many people become planners and they're there for a year or two. And then, we call them hobbyists. Those of us who work the long haul, we call them hobbyists where, I'm a planner and I love decor, I love pretty things, and I'm going to do this. And a couple of years later, then they're just not there anymore. So.
I planned my sister's wedding. I planned my wedding. I'm a planner.
Hobbyists.
Yeah.
So, and it's great because they love it. It's some of those, they love everything about the weddings, which is there. And I have, I've had people who come on as interns and work on there who love this. I want to get into weddings. They just love weddings, they think, and that's great. They love the favors and they love the signs and they love picking out flowers and all their pretty pictures. And that's a part of wedding planning. But I'm telling you, there's a whole other part of wedding planning if you're doing it successfully. I hear all these horror stories and things that go on, like all these, stories and arguments and bad things that happen to some planners. And I'm like, that's because you're not planning. You're just kind of designing with them. You need to especially with weddings and things like that. It's like I tell clients and stuff, they always feel like, well, we feel like we should be doing something. I'm like, no, we did it. We planned ahead. And if I do my job right, there's not a whole lot to do the day of. Like when I go to weddings and I see people running around crazy, I'm like, I don't understand. If you did your job as a planner, what we do, I found out the first time it all clicked when I was younger and I first had my first wedding planning company when I lived in Ohio. I'd run around crazy because I was so nervous. I wasn't sure what I was doing. And then one time, everything clicked. We did a great job planning in advance and it was all ready. And then the day of, I'm kind of like, oh, that's great. Oh, let's, tweak that flower. And it went so smooth. And everybody's like, this is great. I'm like, look, you can do this. You don't have to run around crazy. It's just because you did planning. So
is it about having a plan A and a plan B, or is it just about planning it right the first time?
Always, whenever, because you just don't know whether it's, something you learn from experience, but you have to have those plan A's and B's. And you just have to have, even if you don't think so, if you don't need a weather backup or you don't know this is going to happen, but you learn through it. The one time I was working at a hotel in Columbus and, I just talked to the couple and it was great. They were so happy. And I went to my office and did some cleaning up and I was coming down to see them again. They walk out. I was all happy, like, how's it going? And she's like, and she walked by Groom walked out and he's like, they just dropped the wedding cake. And I was like, it's like, what? And you just don't know what to do. But so again, like after experience, you learn like, okay, this is how we need to make it up. And we ended up fixing it and things like that. So, but like having just some backup pieces, you know, what happens, you know, like we travel with a kit that's grown. Like we have like the first kit that has all of like the wires and hot glue and pins and all that other stuff. But then I have a much larger kit that I travel with now for events. And that has like, you know, if we're there's centerpieces, there's like large glass vases, there's extension cords, you know, there's uplights now. There's some like bigger pieces just in case things need to happen and stuff like that. So
That's nice. I have what's called an emergency wedding kit that has everything you could possibly imagine, from tape to soda water for stains and Tylenol and all kinds of stuff, because you never know.
you don't, yeah. And as far as like, you know, the planning, like you said, like you have to have plan A, B, and like even like a C. What happens if your staff doesn't show up, or what happens if some family doesn't show up? And so even though you don't plan on it for that event, you just have it, you know, my interns have those, that's part of their task, is to make sure we have those in their little binder, because we still carry binders. Or if it's on their tablet, it's okay. Just to have those, like just in case. And like sometimes when things are going well and you've got like that downtime, I'll look at them and say, okay, what happens if that kid didn't show up? What's our, you know, what's our backup plan? And they're supposed to be able to like pull it out and this is what you do kind of thing. You know, it's you go as so far as like, you know, where's the nearest grocery store? How late are they open? You know, do you have a baker that you can call who can be able to do something? So that's the kind of like things you have, and you can take those from event to event to event. It's not just customized for each one.
That's really smart. I like that. Something I can add to my, you know,
Yeah.
thought process. One of my favorite tips that I got from a planner was to ask the couple, what does the couple want to drink when they toast? So in other words, they might be pouring champagne or they might be doing some other thing, but what do they want? In other words, is it a specialty drink? Is she pregnant and she can't drink? Or one of them AA or something? And then have that ready so that when it's time for toasting, you've already coordinated with all the other people to make sure that the glasses are full and the person has a microphone and all that moment is ready, but that they have their glasses that say bride and groom or groom and groom, and it's filled with what they want.
Yep.
It just
that right there is wedding planning. You know, it's not just like the pretty and the signs and stuff like that. That's wedding planning. That's like, this is what we need to do. Is there, you know, a member of the family who's the same way? Is, you know, special meals and what can they do? And, you know, I had one where like just had back surgery, so he couldn't sit very long. And so we had to make sure that there were reasons for him to get up and walk around, so it didn't look like he didn't like his new bride because he's walk around all the time. So we just changed the schedule. So that's planning. That's a wonderful story, because that's actual like planning. That's what you need to be doing.
Well, as I say, and so many, I don't get the opportunity to refer planners as often as I would like. But so many of the events that I do don't have planners. And if I can just insert that one little piece of personalization, it ingratiates me to the couple and it just makes it that much more special. So your ideal client, so that I know exactly when let me back up. Start over. If somebody says they need a venue, my first immediate response is no, you don't need a venue, you need a planner. Because if they need a venue, they're starting at the very beginning, and I know they need a planner. If they say they need a DJ, then they need a DJ. Or if they say they need a photographer, they need a photographer. But if they say they need 2 or more services, I need a photographer and a DJ and a florist and a cake, they don't need any of that. They need a planner. So that's my go-to, but I'm looking to get educated from you. Who's like your ideal client, and how do I know immediately I want to send them to Vermilion?
The filthy rich people. No, my ideal client is, it's also a hard answer. You know, it's like, do you answer it to where it's like, you know, if you answer like it's a corporate client for like a big annual gala, that's great. but then you won't think of me for like another piece. So I always tell people my ideal client is somebody who is in need. Is it like you just said though, is that they just, they're like, oh, we need, like we do need like a florist. Like, well, I can suggest a florist. We have those. That's great. That's not like a need. That's just kind of like a one of the basic ones. But they say I need this, and we're not really sure, if we want it to be formal or if we're gonna do it outside, whatever. And it's like that becomes like a multiple need, whatever. And that's like our ideal client. If they already have, a venue location and a DJ and photographer, they have all of that, then they still may need a planner, which is great. Some planners would get excited because they don't have to do anything. But they need someone to organize all of that. So I think just somebody in need is like my ideal client. What part of the industry do I love? I love I love doing weddings until after they eat, and then I kind of want to go. So luckily I have weddings. I don't do drunk very well anymore. But right now, like we love like the big, I love doing meetings and conferences. That's kind of like our thing that we're growing right now for Vermilion Events. But then we also do a lot of like nonprofit events and stuff like that. And I like working with a very wide variety of clientele. I still have some clients that are, very, very small budgets. They're very small nonprofits or charities. And I do them for almost nothing, just one, because I believe in like the work that they do. And that's what we want to do. So we're kind of like all over. My ideal client, I guess. Yeah, it's a very hard answer. I'd be curious to see what everybody answers. Like what's some
well,
of the
you're
answers?
the first that I've asked that question to.
Oh.
So you inspired me.
Somebody who's in need, they're going to say, that's, someone who's confused and lost is like my ideal client, because you get that thrill of planning for them. Which is cool.
Let me, if I may, share with you something that I do, because you mentioned charity events several times, and I actually do a variety of charity events for free. But what I do is, in exchange, I'm going to sit on the board. I'm going to sit on the planning committee that plans this soiree. And as a result, I get introduced to all of the philanthropic, large corporations and people who plan their own events, who can afford me.
Yep. Oh, same thing. There's one large, I'm not going to tell you who it is, charity event that I'm involved in that I do. It's a lot of decor, and we do it is a very small, a couple $100 kind of thing. Just because that's what they originally had, and now they've grown, something like that. And it's a huge event, but I do the same thing. So I sit on the committee, and it's great because I've gotten wonderful client referrals from sitting on that committee. So I absolutely agree. Like I tell like some people who are new to the business the exact same thing. I'm like, there's nothing wrong with doing that. But it's also, I remind them, like, remind yourself that you're on that committee, because I'm curious on how you balance it out, because I'm on several of those committees and they look at me as far as like, well, we need this and we need this and we need this. Can you reach out? And I'm always like, I'm here as a committee member because I can't, in good faith, reach out for just you when I have clients who are other like nonprofits and stuff, because then I'd have to reach out for your silent auction and reach out for your free linen and reach out for this. If I do it for one, I have to do it for all of them. And if I did that, then none of my vendors would ever want to talk to me, because I'm like, hey,
right.
You do it for me, but it's all for free. So when I sit on those committees, like, I do a little bit of asking for like some silent auction items for like, I kind of group it different people, but they are really more to kind of either do that portion that I'm supposed to be doing for them, or just help out with that. Because it's a hard balance to do that, because you want to help them, but how can you?
It's important to understand that nonprofit does not mean that they don't have any money. They certainly want everything for free, but they do have money to spend if they see the value.
Yeah. Well, and you also set a precedence. What I've got myself got into with another one is that I've done what I've done for them at a certain price. And now instead of 10 tables, it's 30 tables and like the whole outside silent auction area. And I'm like, we haven't changed our pricing. But I love what they do, and I love the committee. And I'm like, I'm just going to make this happen kind of thing. So, but they also know that because on the committee, like to sit on the committee, you're supposed to bring in a certain amount of money or bring in a certain amount of, and I'm kind of like, they go around the table and I'm like, kind of like, me because I'm just here as a, like that kind of thing. So, but
this is so helpful. I wish we had another 30 minutes that we could yak some more.
So can I ask a question though?
You can ask a question, but I get to ask my question first.
Oh, go ahead.
Will you please promise that we can do this a second time?
Yes. And we can pick up a different topic of, something else. Absolutely. Mm-hmm. So, but then like close it out and talk about the change that you've done with Event Ensemble. Because if it's kind of inspiring, like, I don't know, if people join, but they don't know like the path that you've taken. And like, it speaks to what we were talking about.
Okay. I don't know if that's a question that you want me to answer right now, but I will tell you that I'm happy to share it with you. It is quite a journey, and that will be something we'll open up with when we get together again.
Perfect.
Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Scott. I appreciate it.